I woke up on Christmas morning earlier than usual, not because of excitement, but because my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Not a call. An email. Subject line, payroll statement, December. For a second I smiled. I know how that sounds. But for the last 4 years, the Christmas bonus wasn't just extra money. It was the thing that made the long nights make sense. The weekends I logged in just to check one thing. The vacations I postponed. The dinners I missed. I rolled onto my side, opened the email, and scanned it the way you always do. Eyes jumping straight to the number. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. My salary was there. Taxes were there. Deductions. Benefits. And then the bonus line. $0. No note. No explanation. No pending, no processing, no footnote at the bottom. Just zero. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. Payroll errors happen, especially during the holidays. I refreshed the inbox, checked the attachment again, zoomed in like the number might change if I stared long enough. It didn't. My wife was still asleep, the house quiet in that way it only is on Christmas morning. No traffic outside, no emails, no pressure. I sat there on the edge of the bed, holding my phone, trying to keep my breathing steady. Then another notification came in, a text message from my manager. Hey, just a heads up. Today's not the day to talk about compensation. Let's keep things positive. We'll connect in the new year. I read it twice. He hadn't said there's been a mistake. He hadn't said I'll look into it. He said don't talk about it. That's when the confusion started turning into something else. Anger came later. First came the math. In October, during my performance review, he'd leaned back in his chair and said, "You're one of our most reliable people. This year wouldn't have closed without you." In November, he'd forwarded me an email from finance, asking for my updated details. Standard year-end process, he said. 2 weeks before Christmas, he'd asked me to stay late to help finalize numbers for a client renewal worth 7 figures. I remember the exact phrasing. This will be good for everyone involved. Everyone. I scrolled through old emails, sitting there in the dim light, pulling receipts like I was already preparing for an argument I hadn't chosen to have. That's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. Back in early September, HR had sent a company-wide update about bonus structure alignment, corporate language, vague. At the time, I'd skimmed it and moved on. Now I reread it slowly. One line stood out. Eligibility is subject to final managerial discretion. Managerial discretion. I hadn't thought much of it then. I trusted my numbers. I trusted my track record. And honestly, I trusted my manager. That trust didn't disappear all at once. It cracked. I replied to his text carefully. No emotion, just facts. Hey, I saw the payroll email. Can you confirm whether the bonus is delayed or omitted? Just want clarity. The message showed as delivered, then nothing. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I watched my wife wake up, stretch, smile at me and say, "Merry Christmas." And I smiled back, hoping it didn't look as tight as it felt. I didn't tell her yet, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't have the words. Later that morning, while the coffee brewed and the house slowly filled with light, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my manager. "We'll discuss after the holidays. Let's not ruin today." That sentence stayed with me. Let's not ruin today. As if the day belonged to him. As if the decision had been sudden. As if this wasn't something that had been decided long before I opened that email. I stared at the screen and a thought crossed my mind that I didn't want to accept yet. This wasn't an accounting error. It wasn't a budget surprise. This was deliberate, and I didn't know it yet. But that moment, standing in my kitchen on Christmas morning, was the last time I believed I was valued there. The thing about anger is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in pieces, small, sharp ones, that cut you when you're not paying attention. For the rest of Christmas Day, I tried to act normal. I opened gifts. I laughed at the right moments. I listened while my wife talked about plans for the new year. But every time my phone buzzed, my stomach tightened, even though I already knew there wouldn't be another message. There wasn't. December 26th was a Monday. The office was technically open, but most people were working remotely, answering emails between leftovers and family visits. I logged in early, more out of habit than expectation. No message from my manager, no follow-up from HR, no explanation, just silence. By mid-morning, I noticed something else. My access to the internal bonus dashboard, the one I'd had for years because part of my job involved forecasting departmental spend, was gone. The link still existed, but my credentials no longer worked. At first, I told myself it was part of the alignment process. Then I checked a shared drive we use for quarterly planning, read-only access. That's when the irritation turned into something colder. I forwarded myself the September HR memo again, this time highlighting the line about managerial discretion. Then I opened my performance reviews from the last 2 years. Every rating exceeds expectations, every comment. Reliable, trusted, critical. There was no paper trail that justified 0. Around noon, my manager finally sent a calendar invite. No description, no agenda, just a 30-minute block labeled Touch Base, New Year Planning. The meeting was scheduled for January 3rd, 9 days away. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The delay wasn't accidental. It was strategic. He was giving himself time for emotions to cool, for excuses to be rehearsed, for me to lose leverage. That afternoon, I reached out to someone I trusted. Mark, a senior analyst in finance I'd worked with for years. Not a friend exactly, but someone who respected clean numbers. I kept the message simple. Quick question. Do you know if bonus payouts were adjusted company-wide this year? He replied 20 minutes later. Not company-wide. Some reallocations at the department level. I didn't ask him to say more. He didn't. But the implication sat there, heavy and unmistakable. That evening, I told my wife. I explained it calmly, laying out the facts the same way I would in a meeting. 0 bonus, no explanation. Meeting delayed until January. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Did they give it to someone else? I hadn't wanted to think about that yet. The next day, December 27th, I found out. A colleague posted a photo in the internal chat channel. Casual, almost careless. A screenshot of a new watch on his wrist with the caption, "Nice way to end the year. Grateful." I knew that watch. He'd talked about it before. He'd been waiting for his bonus to clear. I checked the reactions. Thumbs up. Fire emojis. A comment from my manager. Well deserved. I scrolled back through the channel. 3 similar posts. Different people. Same tone. Different outcome. None of them had worked the renewal I'd closed. None of them had carried the client escalation that nearly collapsed the quarter. And yet, they were being rewarded publicly, while I was being told not to ruin the day. That's when the irritation settled into something steadier. Injustice. Not loud, not explosive. Just a clear, quiet understanding. This wasn't about performance. It wasn't about budget. It was about control. Late that night, I opened my laptop again, not to check email, but to look at my own files, the ones I'd built over years, processes I'd designed, documentation no one else had ever needed, because I was always there to explain it. As I scrolled through them, a thought formed that made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with clarity. They thought I'd accept this. They thought I'd complain, then move on. They thought January would reset everything, but that assumption was about to cost them more than they realized, and I still hadn't said a word. January arrived with the kind of cold that makes everything feel sharper. The holidays were over, the office calendar was filling up again, and the silence around my bonus hadn't broken. It had hardened. The meeting with my manager was set for 9 a.m. on January 3rd. I joined a few minutes early, camera on, posture straight, not defensive, not aggressive, prepared. He joined right on time. Same smile, same calm voice. "Hope you had a good holiday," he said. I did, I replied. I'd like to talk about my bonus. He nodded slowly, as if this were expected but mildly inconvenient. So, he began, folding his hands. This year was complicated. Budgets shifted late in the cycle. We had to make some tough calls. I let him finish. That was important. He talked for almost 3 minutes without interruption. Market uncertainty, leadership priorities, rewarding visible impact, aligning incentives with future growth. The language was smooth, well practiced. When he finally paused, I asked one question. Can you explain what metric I failed to meet? He blinked once. It's not about failure, he said quickly. You did solid work. This was about allocation. Allocation implies redistribution, I said. Where did my portion go? There it was, the first crack. His smile tightened. We don't discuss other employees' compensation. I'm not asking about names, I said. I'm asking whether my allocated bonus was reassigned. He leaned back slightly. Again, these were discretionary decisions. Discretion. The word landed differently now. I nodded as if accepting the answer, then said, For clarity, was this decision documented? He hesitated, just long enough. There's internal rationale, he said. Yes. May I have a copy? I asked. Another pause. We typically don't distribute that level of documentation. I didn't argue. I thanked him for his time. I said I appreciated the transparency. The meeting ended exactly on the half hour. The moment the call disconnected, I sat still, hands on the desk, letting the weight of it settle. Not anger, not shock, confirmation. That afternoon, I requested a copy of my full personnel file through HR. It was a standard right under company policy, one I knew well because I had helped draft the internal compliance checklist 2 years earlier. HR responded within an hour. Polite, professional. Your request has been received. We'll compile the documents and follow up. While I waited, I reviewed something else, my project logs. Every major initiative I'd led had one thing in common: centralized dependency. Systems only I fully understood. Vendor relationships I'd personally negotiated. Approval workflows that ran through my sign-off because it was efficient, and no one had ever questioned it. I wasn't hoarding knowledge. I was being trusted, or so I thought. That evening, Mark from finance called me. Not messaged, called. I shouldn't be doing this, he said carefully, so I'm going to keep it factual. I didn't interrupt. Your department's bonus pool wasn't reduced, he continued. It was redistributed. There it was, clean, undeniable. Was my name on the original allocation? I asked. Yes, he said, and it was significant. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, phone still in my hand. The realization wasn't that they'd taken money from me, it was that they'd assumed I wouldn't notice how. Over the next few days, I did something that probably looked like disengagement from the outside. I declined optional meetings. I stopped offering unsolicited solutions. I worked my hours. No more, no less. But internally, something shifted. I began documenting everything, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I cataloged approvals, archived emails, noted decision points. I didn't alter a single process. I didn't block anyone. I simply made sure that the invisible threads I'd been holding were visible to me. By the end of that week, HR sent over my file. Performance reviews, stellar. Disciplinary actions, none. Compensation notes, vague, carefully worded. One line stood out. Bonus eligibility, adjusted per management discretion. No justification. No supporting document. That absence spoke louder than anything else. That night, I told my wife something I hadn't said out loud yet. They didn't just take the bonus, I said. They tested how much I'd tolerate. She looked at me for a long moment. And? She asked. I closed my laptop. They just got their answer. The shift didn't happen all at once. It started quietly, the way structural failures usually do. 2 weeks after the meeting, a vendor escalation came in late on a Thursday. Nothing dramatic, Just an issue with a renewal clause that needed sign-off before Monday. Normally, I would have handled it in 10 minutes. I knew the language, the history, the workaround. This time, I forwarded it, not to cause a problem, not to make a statement. To follow procedure, the person I forwarded it to asked a clarifying question. I answered it, then another, then another. Each response took a few hours because I was no longer responding outside business hours. By Monday morning, the vendor was frustrated. The client noticed. No one accused me of anything. There was nothing to accuse. In the weeks that followed, similar things happened. A system sync failed because an undocumented dependency hadn't been flagged. A report went out incomplete because assumptions I usually filled in weren't written anywhere official. I didn't step in light to fix them anymore. I let the process work as designed. My manager called me into a one-on-one near the end of January. No calendar theatrics this time. Just a short message. Can we align? On the call, his tone was different. Less relaxed, more alert. I've noticed some friction lately, he said. Things aren't moving as smoothly. I've noticed that too, I replied. Which things specifically? He hesitated. A few deliverables have been delayed. Teams are saying they're not getting guidance. I've been responding to everything routed to me, I said, within SLA. That may be technically true, he said, but you've always been more proactive. I nodded. Yes, I said. That was discretionary. He didn't like that word when it came from me. At the end of the call, he asked me, carefully, if I was planning to leave. I'm planning to do my job, I said, and I meant it. Early February, an internal audit request went out. Routine, randomized, at least that's how it was framed. The focus area, approval workflows and vendor overrides. My name appeared on more of them than anyone realized. Not because I was reckless, but because the company had leaned on me to move fast, to bypass bottlenecks, to make things just work. Audit didn't imply wrongdoing. They asked questions. I answered them, fully, factually. And I forwarded documentation, lots of it. Emails showing decisions I'd made with verbal authorization, chat logs where urgency overrode policy, messages from leadership thanking me for saving the quarter. I didn't editorialize. I didn't accuse. I just provided context. By mid-February, leadership meetings were being rescheduled. Finance froze certain approvals temporarily. Legal got involved, not because of me, but because the patterns were suddenly visible. One afternoon, Mark texted me again. Did you trigger something? He asked. No, I replied. I stopped absorbing it. That week, my manager stopped messaging me directly. Everything went through HR group channels. His tone shifted in public. Overly formal, carefully neutral. The bonus conversation never came up again. But something else did. In early March, the company announced a restructuring initiative. Process optimization, governance alignment, the usual language. What wasn't announced publicly was that several managers were being reviewed for compliance lapses, including mine. On a Wednesday afternoon, I was asked to join a call with HR and legal, not as a subject, but as a source. They asked me to walk through how certain approvals had been handled historically, why exceptions were made, who had pushed for speed over protocol. I told the truth, the entire truth. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done carrying other people's shortcuts. At the end of the call, Legal thanked me for my cooperation. HR asked if I had any concerns. I thought about the bonus, about the silence, about being told not to ruin the day. I do, I said, but I think you already see them. After that, things moved quickly. My manager went on leave, then extended leave. His calendar disappeared. His projects were reassigned. No announcement, no farewell email, just absence. For the first time in months, the pressure in my chest eased, but it wasn't over yet. By April, the building felt different, quieter, more careful. Meetings had agendas again. Decisions were documented. People stopped saying just push it through and started asking who actually owned the risk. My manager never came back. Officially, his leave turned into a transition. Then an internal announcement followed. Brief, sterile, deliberately vague. He had decided to pursue opportunities outside the company. Leadership thanked him for his contributions. No mention of bonuses. No mention of audits. No mention of why his name quietly vanished from every approval chain. 2 weeks later, HR asked me to join another call. This time, it was shorter. They acknowledged that my bonus had been incorrectly handled. That wording mattered, not delayed, not discretionary, incorrectly handled. They offered a retroactive payout, full amount, plus an adjustment. I thanked them, professionally, without satisfaction showing on my face. When the money hit my account a few days later, I didn't feel relief the way I expected. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell anyone right away, because the bonus was never the real cost. The real cost was trust. In May, I had my annual review, this time with a different director, someone who asked questions instead of making assumptions, someone who read my documentation before the meeting. Halfway through, she closed her laptop and said something that caught me off guard. "You've been carrying more than your role for a long time," she said, "and we didn't notice because things didn't break." I nodded. That was true. "We're fixing that," she continued. "But I want to be clear. If you ever feel something's wrong again, you don't need permission to speak up." I believed her, not blindly, but enough. 3 months later, I accepted a new role, same company, different division, clear boundaries, shared ownership, no silent expectations. On my last day in the old department, I packed my things slowly. People stopped by to say goodbye. Some looked relieved, some looked guilty. A few looked confused, like they were only just realizing how much had been resting on one person they'd taken for granted. As I shut down my laptop, I thought back to that Christmas morning, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at a zero, wondering how something that felt so personal could be brushed off as inconvenience. They had thought I'd explode, or quit, or forget. Instead, I stayed still. I paid attention. I let the system reveal itself, and in the end, it corrected, because it had to. Not out of kindness, not out of apology, but because when you stop covering for broken incentives, the truth surfaces on its own. That was the real bonus, and I earned every part of it.